But I, of course, found the wheel, and I, of course, touched the cursed spindle, and I fell asleep, not unto death, as I was forewarned, but into a slumber so deep I vanished, even from myself. Today on the Comic Book Report, Briar, Volume 1, Sleep No More, from Boom Studios. Stick around and check it out. Greetings, everyone. My name is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've got a quick little trade paperback review courtesy of Boom Studios. A huge thank you to all of those at Boom for sending over this review copy in exchange for this honest review. But yeah, today we're looking at Briar, and I'll admit right from the top I was interested in this title primarily because of the cover design and the character model for this central character, and also I heard it was kind of a remixed reimagining of a Sleeping Beauty folktale. And honestly, that's really what we got here. It definitely fit the billing, and I was surprised to see the twists and turns this very first volume took. But why don't we go ahead and get started with today's review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this collection were written by Christopher Cantwell and illustrated by Germán, García. The issues in this volume were published by Boom Studios beginning in 2022. The volume itself collects Briar, issues 1 through 4. And finally, this is a standard size trade paperback edition with glossy print paper stock, a glued binding, and a total of 128 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first dedicated look at the front cover of today's trade paperback collection. Again, this is Briar from Boom Studios, Volume 1. And again, I love the cover design to this, lifted from one of the issue covers. I just think it's really striking. I love the just visual aesthetic of this kind of haunted princess. I love the kind of briar-filled, cursed land. I just love that you get all of that within this central image. I think the stylized font for the main title and even the creators' names, the name of the volume, everything, it's just looking really sharp. The spine design as well is really stylized and nice as well. We have all of the similar elements you'd probably expect, like the publisher, volume number, title of the volume itself, and the last names of the creators. I love that we retain the kind of pink font, and this time we have the Briar title in kind of a white font, just looking really good on the shelf. The back cover, though, is very striking. I do see some collections pulling their punches a bit on the back covers, but not so with this. We have this amazing kind of hand holding a sword. In the reflection of the sword, we have our main protagonist as well. We have a description about the book, the issues it collects, some reviews or kind of accolades there, and then the publisher, pricing information, all of those things. We have a teen, 13 plus age rating. But yeah, all pretty standard stuff, but just looking good. And now a quick look at the binding for all you prospective collectors out there. As I mentioned, it is a glued binding, and this is just pretty standard for what I can expect from trade paperback collections. We maybe have a little bit of gutter loss, nothing too bad, and mine laid down flat, so I'd be able to push down the page a bit and see anything that kind of fell into that gutter. But again, nothing too bad, and you'll be able to look better as I flip through as well. Okay, and with that, we can go into the book proper. So as we open Briar Volume 1, we have a nice kind of page there, title page. We have creator breakdowns as a 2-page spread, publication information, and before long we are treated to the first issue. Now, we don't have any of the covers in this collection until the back of the book. We do have a cover gallery at the back, so rest assured we do have the covers, they're just all the way at the back. What we do have between each issue, though, is a kind of chapter break where we have the chapter number, which corresponds to the issue number respectively, and we have each issue actually having its own chapter title. I really did like that. I love how stylized the chapter chapter break pages were. I thought it was a nice feature. I would have maybe thrown in the covers before each chapter break, but that's just my personal preference. I am still happy we have them at the back though. But the story of Briar might sound familiar to some of you. That is because it is, as I mentioned earlier, a take on the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale. But of course we have a nice twist. The series itself starts with kind of idyllic imagery, an art style that we don't see much replicated in this volume, but it basically tells us sort of the prototypical story of Sleeping Beauty. However, we do have some kind of warped narration here. We find out that the narrator of the true story has died, and the narrator in its stead is kind of gruesome and is going to have pretty rough details. Briar Rose is still the same character, but her fairy tale is twisted and corrupted, and when she is cursed from the spindle and put into the long sleep, her kingdom does indeed kind of grow with all the briars and kind of messed up things, but her prince never really saves her. He takes the kingdom, yes, he goes to war, yes, but he leaves her sleeping in a rotting castle for very, very long. After that, the series picks up with someone kind of crusading through the briars and ultimately finding some kind of way to release Briar Rose from her sleeping curse. And she basically awakens not unlike kind of a zombie. She's desiccated, she's, a little bit worn out from her curse, and now she's in this kingdom that has completely fallen. She's in this gruesome dystopia that she doesn't even recognize, and she's struggling to come to herself, kind of get her bearings, so to speak, while fending herself against so many threats, most immediately by gigantic rodents, but then followed by just the general populace of what society has degraded to around her. For the issues in this volume, we not only get introduced to the primary character of Briar Rose, Sleeping Beauty, but her cast of characters. Essentially, she gets sold into kind of slavery or kind of caged up. She escapes with this blue-skinned other person who was kind of from a warring kingdom. They ultimately become unlikely friends and allies for the rest of the journey we have here in this first volume. We have her trying to find her way back to initially her fairy godparents who supposedly were looking out for her, but we find out might have been instrumental in keeping her cursed and asleep. The landscape and kind of power dynamics within this kingdom have also changed quite a bit from when she was in, a princess in this once beautiful kingdom. But we have her finding kind of a coven of magic users at one point. She goes into this kind of forested village where we basically meet a man witch who joins them on their crew briefly as well. We get some, again, really gruesome backstory from some of the fairy godparents and some other things that have happened in this world. We find out that she has been hunted by some villainous forces, of course, and ultimately we have the next step in her plan to kind of seek refuge in this gated sort of other region. To do so, though, they have to get through the gate guard, and she's trying to prove her nobility or her sense of place. They reason ultimately that they can maybe do that by finding like a fabled champion for this community, and that really relies on their kind of magic using friend to help them out. But of course they get ensnared by some of the dark and villainous powers that pursue them, and ultimately they do find their way into the guarded castle keep to presumably begin their next phase of adventures to try to topple the dark forces that are empowered in this region. That, broad strokes, is the overall shape of this first volume. We have some harrowing fights. We do have some foundational character development here, some interesting interactions. The art throughout it, I think, is really striking. It has a visual aesthetic that I enjoy. Overall, I mean, there were some moments that maybe didn't work for me as much. I think some of the character models are really rounded, hard outlined, look kind of animated, but I liked it. I did think the world was immersive. It's definitely a fantasy kind of fairy tale landscape, just twisted and darkened in its way, but I think it is visually striking. I think the coloring as well is beautiful. It absolutely pops. We have a good alternating between kind of warm color palettes and cool color palettes and kind of drab earthen color palettes. I do think the coloring is really, really fantastic throughout this whole work. I think it's definitely a standout. Boom's printing as well printed these colors absolutely wonderfully. They're so vivid just jumping off the page. But I do think that the characters didn't quite land for me. While I felt they were compelling and interesting, I had a hard time finding roots with some of them. I did like the overall setup of this world and their quest, but I had a hard time just relating to Briar Rose, I think, ultimately, and I think some of her newer companions are a bit more enigmatic, even. I do know that this is the first part of a larger series, so perhaps with subsequent volumes, I would have a deeper appreciation for these characters. But I think for a first volume, as much as we got great kind of foundational exposition and world building, I don't know if the characterization landed for me for this first volume. I think I wanted a little bit more substance there, just to help me attach and care a bit more about these characters. But my experience might not be indicative of those around me. I know that this series has fans, certainly, or ought to. But again, for me, I think that the characters are where I didn't quite connect in. I do think the world building is fantastic. I think the overall kind of legends and different things they create in here all work and strike on all cylinders. I'm a huge fan of anything fairy tale-esque, so that was a huge draw for me for this series. But I think overall, it didn't just hit as hard as I was hoping it to. It was no means bad. I liked it, but I just had a hard time with the characters. I would love to hear for fans of this franchise, or maybe for those that have kept up or read further than me. Do these characters get better development as we go? What did you think of the rest of this series? I'd love to get some feedback on that, trying to decide if I read further or not. At the back of the book, as you've seen, we had that cover art gallery, some behind the scenes character modeling and art, a map of the region, creator bios, and that's really the Briar Volume 1. And I think all that's left to do now is to give this book a grade. For this fresh remix of an old fairy tale, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Briar Volume 1 Sleep No More by Christopher Cantwell and Germán García a C+. This was definitely an above average read for me, even if it was just so. I thought the art direction and coloring were all top notch, and while the plotline and world building in general for this fantasy landscape were absolutely dialed in and there for this introductory volume, the character development didn't quite land for me. While I found the characters to be charismatic, they were maybe not engaging me in the way that gave me roots with each of these individual characters. Hopefully in subsequent volumes I will feel more attached to them, but it just didn't quite land for me, and I think that that was ultimately one of the holdups for keeping this from being maybe a classic read for me. I still loved the kind of folklore fairy tale aspect of it all. Like I said, I was a fan of the art, and I do think the world building for this fantasy series was really well done, but that's just kind of where I landed for this first volume. I would love to hear in the comments, though, what did you think of Briar? Have you read this series? After watching my review, are you interested in picking it up? Let me know all of that in the comments, and thank you so much for watching today's review, and a huge thank you again for Boom Studios for sending over this volume in exchange for this review. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, that comment we talked about, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Thanks, and have a good one.